Hello! This story is part of a series titled Memories of Tehran. When I was a little boy, my father used to tell us bedtime stories. At around the age of 8, Storytime went away. And while I didn't realize it, it was something I needed. Before Storytime could return, two things needed to happen. The first, Nari Uncle, my dad's brother, needed to move from India to Iran, and on one of his work trips to Russia, he needed to purchase a transistor radio. And, as is the case when one is on a journey, there are obstacles to overcome. Welcome to Storytime with Kumars. My name is Kayo Jijina, and this is my story titled Storytime in the Transistor Radio. I hope you enjoy it. Dad's brother Nariman, or Nari Uncle, had stopped by for a visit. He brought with him a small carry bag, the type of bag used for duty-free purchases of Johnny Walker or Remy Martin. Uncle set the bag down on the dining room table, which greeted visitors when they first entered our Kuche Bahman apartment. Gently, he removed its contents, a box containing something called a micro radio. It was small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. I had never seen a radio quite so small. The name on the case said Standard. Uncle turned the volume switch to on and began to tune in a local radio station. To my amazement, the little rascal worked. Dad and Uncle began to express their enthusiasm for the radio as many grown-ups do, by analyzing it. The radio had 8 transistors and no tubes. How did they do it? It was made in Japan. Who knew the Japanese could make something so small? They seemed to be well on their way to beating the Americans when it came to designing electronics. I stood next to Dad and watched, soaking it all in. The radio had a bright red case and a chrome finish, along with a darling little chain. It was battery operated with no AC cord to plug in, meaning I could take it anywhere without being constrained like a dog on a leash. For me, the radio was love at first sight. Eventually my birthday rolled around, as did the standard 8-transistor radio. I don't recall if it was my 12th or 13th birthday, but what I do remember was before I could walk away with the radio, there were stipulations. Conditions I had to agree on, and Mom went over them one by one. Number 1, the volume had to be kept on low. Number 2, on weekdays I could listen to the radio only after I completed my homework. And number 3, no listening after bedtime. The moment was fragile. I saw the radio as dangling on a string that could be easily snatched away at any moment. For now, it would be best to agree to all the conditions. The first couple of months, I followed all the rules, and all was well with the radio and Mom. Until one evening, when bedtime was running a little late, and I happened across an Iranian radio station offering a drama story. I listened. It felt like a television program, but the picture came from the imagination. I experienced a flashback. I was 6 or 7 years old. Brother and I were piled on Mom and Dad's bed. Dad was sharing a bedtime story with us. It was called The Magic Box. Storytime with Dad had been a tradition for several years. Back then, the conditions were Brother and I had to brush our teeth and change into our pajamas before Storytime could begin. Storytime had reappeared. This time it was on the radio, and the conditions were a little more challenging. It was not just a matter of brushing my teeth or changing into my pajamas. First I had to figure out what to do about rule number 3. No radio after bedtime. And there was one more concern. It had to do with censorship. In our home, what we could listen to or watch had to be approved by Mom. For example, Rawhide, Dragnet, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Batman, Bonanza, Perry Mason, and Wolfman Jack were some of the shows considered adult material and not suitable for children. They were on the banned list. Cartoons, no matter what the content or subject matter, were on the approved list. Shows like Lost in Space, My Favorite Martian, The Beverly Hillbillies were considered acceptable for children to watch and on the approved list. I listened for a while longer to the radio drama and quickly figured out the show was at risk for being censored. Mom might place the kibosh on it if she knew. I decided to play it safe. Better to maintain a low profile and stay under Mom's radar than to ask. It was approaching winter and the nights were growing cold. Mom had pulled our winter coats and quilts out of mothballs. I used to love the scent of mothballs. I snuck the radio into bed with me and crawled underneath the quilt for a listen. I thought the quilt was thick enough to muffle any sounds the radio might make. Before I knew it, Mom was tugging on the quilt, demanding to see the radio, and little brother was standing next to her. I lost my radio privileges for a week. A few weeks later, I was playing around with the radio in bed, trying to figure out how to listen to it quietly without interrupting Mom and Dad's afternoon nap time. For some reason, I decided to place the radio under my pillow. I was amazed I could not hear a sound. I placed one ear on the pillow as if I were sleeping, and the sound was crisp and clear. The same night, I decided to give the radio a try in bed. I turned it on, placed it under my pillow, and kept a watchful eye on little brother and Mom. There was no reaction. They did not suspect a thing. Later, Dad stopped by to ruffle my hair and say goodnight. There was no mention of the radio either. Could he tell and just chose to ignore it? Remaining cognizant of my surroundings, I listened to Storytime night after night. Some nights I fell asleep before Storytime ended. On other nights, I could not listen all the way through because the stories were sad and scared me. Stories like Ferdowsi's epic of Rostam and Sohrab, in which the father unknowingly kills his son in battle. My dad's name was Rostam, which made it a little more personal for me. As I complete the writing of this story, I seem to be left with a question. The question being, do events in our youth shape who we are as adults? Events such as Dad sharing his stories with us and hearing Storytime on the radio. Or, in the words of Paulo Coelho, when we follow our path in life, the universe conspires to help us. We're Dad and Nuri Uncle, a part of something larger, helping me to realize a destiny of sorts. A story time of my own.